Okay, in this video I'm going to take a look at defining the fault path table. So far in the previous videos I've looked at this area here, which is the VW or VAG code block or table, and I've looked at the one that's further along this way, which was the P code table. Now both of these are arranged in rows of 4, and they feed into this area here. I've just highlighted in pink to make it obvious. They feed into this area, and this is the fault paths. So this is where the previous information about errors feeds into. So if you've got an error up this way somewhere that's an EGR error, it might be 1 in a little row of 4, and that one of a little row of 4 feeds into one of the paths in here. And these are not arranged in little rows of 4, they're not arranged in any rows at all, unless you count a row of 1 as being a row. Now you can't tell very much by looking at a 2D view, so I'll change to text view. Right, there's the VAG codes ending, I believe, so ending there. Now I believe so far, from having a look at the two bits of the file, that I've got 383 P codes, 383 VAG codes, not as in codes, but as in little blocks of 4 where there would be codes. So I've got 383 of those, so that's 383, 4 sets of those if you like, and then I've got 383 another 4 sets of those. So in total I've got not 383 plus 383, but I've got 2 lots of 383, so two tables that are that size, each with 4 possible places in them for the code to exist. So that's 2 lots of 4, so that's 8. So the 2 blocks between them are really giving me one big block in 2 halves, and that one big block is 383 blocks of 8 possible codes, and it's the 8 which is the important bit, because each of those blocks of 8, whether it's a block of 8 or 2 blocks of 4, it doesn't matter, but each of those feeds into one fault path, which means that there should be here 383 fault paths. Doesn't look very likely, does it? And the reason it doesn't look very likely is because it looks way too small. The reason it looks way too small is we're looking at it in 16-bit, and these paths here are 8-bit. So if I convert those to 8-bit, still doesn't look as if there is as many of these as there is all of those up there, but there is. And the correct way to look at these is to look at them in a single item, because that's how they would be considered to be. In other words, there would be 4 and 4 leading to just that number there. So I would have a row of 4 somewhere up here of P codes feeding just to that number there, that 001, and then I would have a row of 4 up here somewhere, VAG codes, and they would also feed just to that one there. So that would be 8 possible places where a code might exist, and they would all feed to that single spot there. So if I've got a total of 383 rows, I only need 383 of these individual messages or paths. So I just need to count these and find out, is there 383? It's as simple as that, because if there's 383 of these, then I know that this is probably the exact block that I want. Now if we look, how many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I've got 16 at the moment, so if I make that 17, 18, 19, 20, I'm just doing this for convenience to make them easier to count. I'll move that across to there. So that's 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, so that's 200. 20, 40, 60, 80, 300, 20, 40, 60, 80, 81, 82, 83. So there's 383 path individuals there, and that matches our VAG blocks of 4, which is up there. But these are 16-bit, these are 8-bit, so I need to change the view. Now you can see where this becomes quite difficult, because when you're searching for this block, take a look at the numbers around it. How do you know that 001 there is the starting point? At first glance above, it's obvious 001 is much smaller than any of those numbers up there, but look, this might not have started with 001. You've got numbers like 025, 014. So how do you know that 022 there is not part of this, or 022 there is not part of this, or that 01 isn't part of this, or that 005 isn't part of this? So it can be quite complicated, and when you decide you want to know where the table is going to end, well, where does it end? Does it end at that 002, or does it end at that 00, well, 000, or does it end at that 004, or at that 077, or that 000? So it's quite difficult to work out where these tables start and end. The clue usually is finding the end of the VAG code block, because the path block usually starts straight afterwards, so that gives you a starting point. And if you already know that 383 is the number that you're considering as important, then of course you can count from that point there. Right, now finally, before you actually consider doing anything with this data, you need to get your head around the fact that in reality, if you want to compare this data with the previous data, it should be arranged like that, because that number is comparable with a row of 4 P codes or a row of 4 VAG codes. So there are 4 codes that feed into that point from the P code table, so there's a row that feeds into that point, and there is also a row of 4 VAG codes that feed into that point. So that point represents a path for 4 P codes, or 4 possible P codes, because they might not all be used, and 4 possible VAG codes. So there are 8 possible codes feeding into that point, and 8 more feeding into that point, and 8 more into that point, and 8 more, and so on. So every one of these has got 8 possible codes feeding into it. And the number that you're looking at here is simply telling the ECU where to go to look next to decide what to do. So in other words, having got to this point, it's saying you need to act on instructions for 001. So all of those 8 codes that fed into that point there are all going to be acted on the set of instructions that are for 001. So if you could go to 001 and look at it, you would see yet more numbers, and those numbers would be the set of instructions that are going to be acted upon. I'm not going to go into that at the moment, because it just gets more and more and more complicated, and realistically you don't need to know that information if you just want to get rid of a code that's plaguing you and won't go away. So you don't really need to go that far. Right, now before I go any further, this is obviously getting very, very, very complicated, in the sense that not just the numbers and sizes of tables, but I'm going to have to keep flicking between 8-bit view and 16-bit view. So future videos explaining more detail about this will be in Excel. And to give you an idea of how they will end up in Excel, I will start the next video at this point, but then jump straight to Excel. Right, I'll stop there.